Okay, so let's give this a shot. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, in regards to Clan Smoke Jaguar, there's an obvious parallel to be drawn to them and to our current society, right? This is the unenviable position of what happens if your religious structure prevents you, cultural and religious infrastructure prevents you from doing what is necessary to achieve survival, because of course things moving in the way that we know they do, typically with liberalism, if you allow even an extremist, right, the washouts of your warrior caste who have now been placed into maintenance roles to pilot mechs and extremists, well, I mean, after combat losses, you're pretty much just going to say, all right, you're back into the warrior caste again, effectively, right? You cannot risk that, because with combat, right, and combat losses, and especially in mechanized warfare against the inner sphere, right, it's the lowest common denominator. So eventually, you're going to have your highest tier fighters, no matter how good they are, they're going to get whacked. Right. They're going to get scratched.
But they can be, because the clanners have basically the iron wombs and the cloning technology, or what? It's not essentially cloning, but they take a sperm and an egg from the male.
Yeah, they do. They do eugenics for the warrior caste. Yes.
Yeah. They basically do. It's a kind of cloning, and it kind of, as also as demonstrated, it works.
Yes.
Because their eugenics program works. That's the other interesting part of the clanners, is we took the best warriors of humanity, not only kept cloning them, but breeding them together and together and together over and over.
Yes.
Now, while this could also lead to certain genetic problems, like inbreeding kind of thing.
Right.
But the other hand is the clanner, gene technology is so good, any recessive genetic defaults can be edited out. So that's basically the explanation for why, even though, especially amongst the trueborns, they're basically all built off the same kind of templates, and technically all like brothers and sisters or extended first and second generation cousins, there's no genetic degradation, is because any recessive genetic anomaly traits are basically edited out in the process.
Yeah, so, I mean, but in terms of moving away from a based honor code society with a strict caste hierarchy, allowing fluidity, between castes. Okay, now you're allowing the washouts to come back in. Okay, that's going to open up space. That's going to open up political space, political support. Okay, you have a washout, and even if they're not the best mech warrior, you're giving them a chance in the warrior caste again to prove themselves under fire.
Which maybe they got screwed. You remember how what was it? Aiden Pride was screwed over in his trial by Martha. Aiden Pride turned out to be a fucking goddamn god among mere mortals when it came to his capabilities.
Yes.
And so there's an argument for, okay, well, he washed out. Everyone fucks up or gets stabbed in the back.
Yeah, and that's
well, not everyone gets stabbed in the back, but everyone does a screw up, and if one screw up ruins your entire life, it's like, I forget what that general, the Korean admiral was. He was basically demoted back to bare bones bottom level 3 times, but every time he just got back up and worked his way all the way back up, and he was the guy who inevitably defeated the Japanese invasion of Korea. And he was a legendary admiral. He was killed. They just propped his body up in his armor on the deck of the ship. The quintessential, the admiral's still alive, and they thought the Japanese thought he was still alive and commanding the fleet, and they ended up winning because everyone thought he was still alive. Both ally and enemy thought he was commanding the fleet, and in the final battle, they carried the day. So it's like, even when being demoted and kicked out, if you are an exceptional individual, it's like you should be given the chance.
Yeah, and this is the problem, right? Because if you don't allow those who are in fact like worthy or shall we say borderline cases to enter the ranks of the elite where they have the talent to do so, it creates, at least in Western societies, it obviously creates a lot of resentments.
Yes.
And if people understand, like a Napoleon figure and all of his marshals, oh, I can rise in status by not choosing to back the Ancien regime. Like he had a marshal who was a sergeant in the French Royal Army under Louis, and essentially this guy's like, well, you know, I have to give up on my military career because I can't rise any higher. I can only be a sergeant. I can't, be promoted to lieutenant at all. And this guy eventually became a marshal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the thing about war too, is combat losses typically mean that there is open, like especially in the Napoleonic era where generals and marshals get killed on occasion, there are spots that in leadership that open up.
Mm-hmm.
So you rise.
But it also
relatively
requires a
quickly.
command structure that recognizes talent and is like, I don't care where this guy comes from, he can get the job done.
Yes.
And
he's
that's
good
what
at
the
something.
Smoke Jaguars didn't do, is they're like, no,
Yeah.
no, only our elite warrior caste is going to fight and defend.
Yeah.
I don't care. And that's one of the reasons the invasion of Huntress was such a massive operation. They were probably doomed to fail from the beginning. Task Force Serpent got the snot kicked out of it, but they won. It even got so desperate that Task Force Serpent began orbital bombardment of certain sectors of Huntress just to deal with the threats on the ground, including the first time the Inner encountered protomechs, which were devastating.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is it's just where's the line for this, right? What arrangement could you possibly have to allow outsiders into the ranks of the elite? And I come up to this question all the time because the problem that we have is we were too liberal in that outside groups were able to infiltrate over time into our ranks of the elite, and now they were able to propagandize, and this is the way I'm increasingly seeing it, to propagandize the vulnerable segments of the population that were most out-group preferenced, and able to give those people who have the profile of low class people and give them a means to power.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a major problem because how do you deal with this? How do you become just liberal enough, or you provide a mechanism to provide somebody who is obviously has some sort of talent into positions of power and status,
but keep out the real dregs, the cacostocracy.
Yeah, and keep out for hostile groups.
Yes.
Right. How do you keep out a hostile group who's obviously trying to acquire power inside of your system so that they can rule over it?
Right.
And this is a fear that I have of not just the tribe but also the Indian Brahmin caste. How are we going to deal with them? Getting rid of affirmative action, getting rid of H-1B visas and immigration, and a lot of other stuff would help. This is going, they're already here. They're already in positions of prominence, and they've been placed there artificially, but it doesn't matter. So, how do you deal with this?
Right.
I don't have a good answer other than physical separation and saying, okay, you're over in this society and we're over in our society, and this is one of the reasons why I'm in favor of national divorce as the mostly peaceful, quote unquote, solution. And
Which may just happen on its own because they're not going to be able to hold the coalition together.
Yeah, I mean,
As things incredibly balkanize as people leave and move.
yeah,
You
yeah, and
that's the other thing that is interesting also with the fate of Texas, because everyone's moving there. Texas is becoming a very high IQ, high performing area, because all of the, it was already a free place where businesses could do things and operate, and it's demonstrated it works. But now you're getting a massive dump of not only whites, but high performing other groups moving there. And it's like, it's just going to become eventually in another 50 years, another microcosm of the country as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, that's everywhere though.
Right.
And this is a huge problem. These problems are almost intractable, and eventually what is known as, I listened to a stream on the Fourth Turning yesterday, and eventually this woke shit will die out, but I am absolutely terrified that what is woke will become the new organizing principle of our society.
Yeah.
I'm terrified of this.
Even if it loses, the sentiment will remain.
Yes,
basically.
yes, yeah, it'll just go dormant. And even if, because I can see that it's like, in terms of institutional power, it's very close to victory.
Oh, yes.
To total victory. And once it achieves total victory, it has to tell itself that it's in control of everything. It will realize that it's in control of everything. It will then act like it's in control of everything. But of course, like every left-wing movement in history, it will always persecute the reactionaries because, it's not our policy, it's sabotage that's the problem, right?
Yes, which is, it's
and it will just have to
it's
play out.
like Stalin calling all of his detractors right-wingers.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it will just inevitably end up in death and destruction and 80 years of oppression of the white population, basically. And to be honest, on our fate, I mean, unless things change really soon, I'm very black-pilled on the prospects for the future. Because unless we have physical territory, which is our own, that we politically control, I mean, it's hard if you're a diaspora type, or if you're a minority. Like, it's incredibly difficult to do the things that you want.
But
it means that we'd have to wait an entirely new cycle.
Yeah, 2 to 3 generations.
Or more, 4.
Well,
You have to have
2 to 3 minimum, but 4.
You'd
Well,
have to
because the first 2 would basically be dealing with it.
They'd have to come to the real.
framework.
Yeah, they realize the problems, right? Like, for example, our generation is the hero generation, supposedly. So, like, we would take all of the pathologies of the boomers and, like, implement them into practice, basically. We're very collectivist in our thinking, and we're very much, okay, we'll take all these ideas and put them into practice. And you can kind of see them both on the left and the right. And so you have the next one, which will be the artists, and after that there will be the prophets, and whatever the next prophet generation will be, given another 20 or 40 years of movement and cycle, this is going to be difficult, because, I mean, how can any member of the white population, which remains in 40 years' time, come to the conclusion that no, all of these beautiful, airy-fairy liberal ideas about race and sex and gender were all, like, just nonsense and wrong?
Well, it'll play out because the current regime will not be able to maintain. It's like as Edward Dutton says as well, we're losing an IQ point every decade.
Yes.
Things are deteriorating. We can see it everywhere.
Yes,
You know.
and nobody is capable or can summon the political will to do anything about it, because those things which would be able to stabilize the situation and create a new basis for order is is, you know, the great Satan, which goes against all of the religious principles of the current elite. So
Right, but the situation is going to deteriorate, and we don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
The rest of the world is keeping on spinning in its own way. China, Russia, Iran, all these other countries that have ambitions to break the shackles of global homo are not going to sit idly by.
Yes.
So, I mean, while our fate here might be because we're Fortress Island, you know, yeah, our fate here might be bad, but that's the thing is the rest of the world is going to break out of it, and once the rest of the world breaks out of it and global homo loses that outside power, especially considering how global homo is dependent on foreign importation of material goods, when things get bad here in terms of you can't get imported auto parts, you can't, you know, ship stuff here anymore, all the advanced technology, like, what was it, the chip production. If China were to take Taiwan tomorrow, the globalists would be screwed in terms of getting chips to monitor everyone with all the smart technology.
Yeah, your technology, if you were to be restricted, is like, oh look, all of your tech base that you've, in your architecture and your computers and stuff, all of these things that you use to increase
To maintain your system,
communication, and to maintain communication and coordination ability across the entire world is now gone.
And they're, you know, Biden did the whole chip thing, manufacturing in the US. It's going to take a minimum of 5 years to get up and running, minimum. And there's going to be so many teething troubles and things like that with the production, you know, because like the expertise needed to produce, you know, I mean, they may just simply be like, okay, well, we can't make the smartphone this small anymore, so it's got to go back to being bigger because we can't miniaturize. That's the biggest thing, is the miniaturization. The Taiwanese chips, as far as I know, the biggest thing about them is the miniaturization.
Yeah.
The miniaturization, the fact they can make them so small and they still work. Like, that level of expertise is nowhere else in the world, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's... Well,
there's just, I mean, there's just no, you know, this is why I look at these books on my shelf and I just get this feeling of dread because, you know, I can consume all the knowledge, I can, you know, the big problem is you take in so much knowledge and you understand what the problems are, and nobody seems to be addressing the problems, the real ones.
I have that same feeling all the time.
And it's incredibly annoying. Although there are hopeful signs, going back to the foreign policy thing, there was an article I saw this week, and Prison Folly did a stream on it because I forwarded it to him, and mentioning all the things foreign policy wise that we've mentioned, and he's basically the elite, because it was foreign affairs is a, you know, elite organizational magazine, a publication, and they're noticing things, right? They still talk like a liberal. They still think that, oh, we can do liberal solutions here. Like they're it's just fucking hilarious what they think the solutions domestically in the U.S. are. Oh, we'll have civics education. Okay, what kind? Are we going to have 1776, or are we going to have 1619? The fact that this is not even addressed as to what kind of civics education just tells you.
It's vague and nebulous.
Yes.
They're like, oh, we'll teach people to be good citizens. Really? By teaching one group of the population to hate another unconditionally?
Yes, teaching the heritage population of the United States that, oh, it has a historic, you know, blood guilt that it must constantly self-flagellate for. I'm sorry for being white. I'm sorry for being male. I'm sorry for being heterosexual. I'm sorry for being a normal person.
Yeah. Well, you see, but that's the thing is too, and you can even see this, you saw this in our last conversation, I see it, I just spoke to my Uncle Boomer yesterday at when my grandma was in hospice, and we were just talking in the other room, you know, because she was asleep, but even he sees it, but of course, like I said the last time, he's still stuck in that paradigm of Boomer truth.
Yeah.
You know, but even he has to admit that he sees what, you know, and I dropped some things about bio-Leninism, and he's like, that sounds right, I sent him the bio-Leninism videos. I don't know if he's watched them yet, but those little things, like, even the older generation is gonna have to acknowledge at some point. You heard my parents when they were here the last time, how even they see it now. They see it. They can't turn the blinders off. They can't. The narrative says one thing. Their programming and indoctrination says one thing, but they see, all these squares make a circle. All these squares make a circle. They see it. They see the contradiction. They see the shift in modernity. They understand. Yeah, this shit is no good, but they don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of like the demographics of the country, I'm not super black-pilled on that. I mean, we've had our conversations about losing territory and all that, and that's fine. If we lose 50% of the territory of the continental United States, and we have
200 years, we'll take it back.
Exactly. Once we get out from underneath the thumb of the global American empire, we will have the military and industrial capacity to reconquer.
Well, that's the thing, is we're gonna have to rebuild that industrial capacity, but that's something we can do.
Yes, that's relatively, you can do that relatively quickly.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, look at how quickly Japan industrialized. They went from the medieval period to the modern era in less than 20 years.
Yeah, that takes one generation basically to, okay, now we have control of our school systems, now we have control of education, now we have control of, the economic mechanisms to sort people into their proper position in society. Okay, that's great. And so the other alternative, right, is what happens if this whole system collapses and somebody who is on the right, like us, takes power? Well,
Sorry.
the solution that we basically sell to the minority populations is, if you don't like this is a white people country, you can stay if you behave. And if you don't like that arrangement, you can shut the fuck up or get the fuck out.
Yeah.
And that's the option that you have to give them, no in between. You either admit that this country is what it is and you're fine with that, and if you're just here to make money, that's fine. I don't care.
But you will be loyal, and
Yes.
you will be purged if you're not loyal, i.e. you will be kicked out.
Yes.
You don't have to kill people, you just kick them out.
Yes. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you will have to use force.
But kicking people out is force as well.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is
It's
the groups
a
that
different form of exit.
Right, okay. Well, the groups that are low performing, like the ghettos and all that, is like basically like, shut the fuck up, we're not dealing with this grievance politics, we don't feel guilty about shit because we're not guilty of shit, shut the fuck up about something that happened 300 years ago, 200 years ago, our people died for you and you're a bunch of ungrateful cunts, and you let yourselves become wards of the state and dependent and live in these ghettos. You never tried to do anything, you just blame other people for your problems, shut the fuck up. That's basically the attitude that's coming out now in the white population. And that's the other thing too, the people who have this self-flagellating psychopathy, is that the right word, psychopathy, psychosis, whatever, they're not having children, they're not breeding.
Yeah, and
that propensity is literally being bred out of the white population, which,
yes.
Remember how I talked about in science fiction, the civilizational hurdles you have to pass, like at every stage, you have to, develop technology, blah, blah, blah. What is the final threshold to achieving the stars? Making sure the spiteful mutant population is culled.
Yes,
And that's the hurdle. The final hurdles of becoming a spacefaring advanced civilization are when you achieve this technological ease of life. The Darwinian condition is no longer the harsh Darwinian condition, it's the internal spiteful mutant explosion that occurs because people who never would have survived in a harsh Darwinian condition are now alive and propagating and now in control. So your next hurdle for any species, any civilization to reach the stars is, how do we cull or contain this destructive element within ourselves that is holding us back?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's also the leftist population is interbreeding at much higher rates than the conservative white population. So you can see, not only are they not having children, but they're also getting bred out of being white, basically.
Right.
So it's very fascinating, basically, because you can say, no, you're not white. You can talk to the children of a leftist who's fucking a nigger, and you're like, their children, you can say, no, you're not white. You're not white. You're obviously not white. You may be
What
part
was
white.
the term they used to use, mulatto or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that?
yeah. Whatever term you want to use, you just say, okay, well you're mixed, okay. Well, but that doesn't, you're not white, so stop
Yeah.
claiming that you are, because you're not one
Well,
of
but
us.
that's the thing, in the modern society, they don't wanna claim that they're white as
Mhm.
well, so give it to them. Okay, you're not white.
Mhm.
You know, but that's the other thing too, I remember there was a couple articles I read where
Well,
all these mixed race children, especially in this age of politicking and, ethnic politicking, they don't know where they belong.
Mhm.
Half black, half white,
Well, they either make a choice one way or the other, and specifically right now they're making a choice to be as not white as possible because they can see all of the institutional incentives go one way.
Right. Oh shit. Those things